Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inventing, the only show entirely created to dramatically impact the 98% invention failure rate by diving into the heart of inventors and innovation with the diverse thought leaders from Fortune 500 companies, inventors, and experts who share their authentic stories about the products that we buy and use every day. I'm so glad you're here. As my audience, and for those of you who are just joining me for the first time, this is a relatively new program, so I'm still kind of working out the bugs, but I'm thrilled to be able to share with you today that Jim DeBetta is my guest, longtime friend and colleague in the business of wacky world of inventing. Jim is an expert on licensing, manufacturing, wholesaling, helping inventors get through the entire processes, and more specifically and recently, working with small companies as well as independent inventors on bringing their products into retail, which is exciting because there was a time when I got started that just wasn't possible. In fact, if you were an inventor, you really had to license. So Jim, I am so happy to have you on the program today. Thank you very much for being one of my guinea pigs as I get to know how to do this.
That's so funny. I know, like you said, we've known each other. I don't know how many years it's been, but like we were talking before, right? How there's not that many of us that are still crazy enough to be doing this, and here we are still at it. So yeah, it's great to be on, of course.
Right. Well, and I think that it's, as we mentioned also earlier, there are more people kind of in this business now than a lot of people that are in this business now than there were when you and I first got started. In fact, we used to have to use the yellow pages, and there were no invention services categories in the yellow pages. Remember that?
Yeah, oh yeah, and you're right. I think with social media, that everybody is an expert in everything. It seems anyway. But you said something interesting. You said there's a 98% failure rate.
Yeah.
That's it's funny because that kind of probably slipped by anybody there, but
right.
It really is probably around there. I mean, there's no way to really know for sure, right? But I always tell people unfortunately, it's a business of failure, right? It's a very difficult business to crack into.
It is. The 98% failure rate, it's my understanding, came from the little bit of research that the FTC was able to do in the days where some of the invention scam companies were offering fraudulent services or unhelpful services. And so the way that they decided to measure success and then required the companies to report on their success is how many of you have earned more, your customers, your clients have earned $1 or more than what they spent on your services.
Right. Yeah, that was the formula that they were using. And I think a lot of that was on the licensing side too, because these invention promotion companies typically were trying to license, or that was their thing. So whereas the world of going to retail, that's impossible to peg, right? I know it's still a high failure rate simply because a lot of people try to go at it on their own and they don't know, but it's like a lot of things, they don't report their failure or their successes sometimes. So it's hard to know, but we do know that it's a high number, unfortunately.
It would be nice if the patent office had a budget to follow up with the small entity or micro entity submissions and just send out a letter to everybody and say, could you please report back to us?
Yeah. How you doing? Did you make more money than you spent?
Make any money? How'd you do? Yeah. Like make 3 to 5 questions real quick.
Yeah.
Answer.
Yeah. I think they'd get a good response on that because people want to say they succeeded and worse, if they failed and something went wrong that they didn't feel was their fault, they would probably want to voice that.
Right. But you make a really good point with regard to retail. So as I said, when I got started, you had these retailers, large mass retailers, department stores, whatever, and an independent inventor who had the resources to manufacture and sell still had a very difficult time, if they were able at all, to get space on the shelf in the retailers because the vendors typically wouldn't want to work with an independent inventor or wouldn't want to work with a single SKU, all kinds of reasons around that. But the world is changing, and whether it's Etsy or Amazon or Walmart online, where you can then make your segue, there's a lot of changes. So in your experience, as you've seen, since you mentioned earlier, I can say you've been around for a long time without offending you. What have you seen the transition, and what do you see the trends are now with independent vendors who do choose to go that route?
Well, I agree. definitely there are a lot more opportunities. Back in the day, right, since you're already dating me, let's go back before 2000.
I was there, so that dates me too.
Right, so for all of us that were around like back then, there was only one way to do it, and that was before really the internet was really anything. We had to go to trade shows, and we had to sit there for 4, 5, 6 days in a row and do every trade show that was available. That was the only way to meet buyers and approach retailers. And then if you were lucky enough and you met a buyer, you could follow up later. I mean, we were sending hand letters. I mean, we were doing all kinds of things, or calling them on the phone and making appointments. And then we would fly to their office, pitch, and go home and wait for them to say yes or no. But today, because of social media, because of the internet, because of all these, like you said, the Etsy's and the Amazons and people building their own websites. And we were just talking about websites. Like, you don't have to know how to build a website, and you can build a website. It might not be amazing or great, but you can do it. And that opens up a whole world of opportunity for inventors, which means that we are seeing more successes. Whether those are big successes or little, it doesn't matter. More people have opportunity. They have easier ways to learn about inventing, which is huge. And then they're able to go out and find people like us out in the industry, the things we post, the things we write, shows like this, and they can learn and hopefully get a good start. And that, of course, gives them a lot of other opportunities to do it.
So my passion is changing that number, whatever that number realistically is. We'll use 98%. I want to dramatically impact that. I want to see more people be successful. And I certainly understand helping educate them on how to innovate. But to innovate well, to invent a solution that will sell, being the goal, you have to understand everybody, all of the constituencies that benefit from it on the commercialization path, right? So it has to be manufacturable. If it can't be made, it can't be sold. It has to fit on a shelf because of the dollars per square inch. It has to, all of the different people. When you're looking at a product and you're reviewing it, do you find that inventors have properly solved the problem, not just for the consumer, or do you often see challenges with regard to the unseen issues that they didn't consider when they were inventing their product?
Yeah, well, I mean, the nice thing is that I get access to tons of product all the time. A lot of great ideas. Just when I think everything's been invented, somebody comes along and changes something, improves it. So there's no shortage of good products. And a lot of people come to me with them, and they look good. They're packaged well. Not to say that they don't need some tweaking, but generally speaking, a lot of people do today a pretty good job of getting a product ready. But the one thing that they don't really understand is that when you deal with these large retailers, these multi-billion-dollar entities, it's a business. And that's all it really is to the retailer. I mean, they don't really want to sit down and listen to why you invented it or how long it took. They definitely don't need to hear how much you spent on it and everything else. They don't want to see the tears. And I mean, those are human things. Those are things that people like to hear, and it's inspiring. But when you're approaching a 2,000 store chain buyer whose job is to get a product, profit from it, or they potentially lose their job, it's all business. And I think the one preparation part of the business that they don't get, the inventor, is the business part. They don't understand all the ins and outs of presenting a product, what the buyer needs specifically in terms of profit margin, where the product, how much product needs to come in, how many pieces they may potentially need, that they need product liability insurance, that they need UPC codes on the package. There's dozens of little things that are needed. And those are the things that the inventor typically doesn't understand. And then they go ahead and they order a product from the factory, bring it in, and find out that it's all wrong. Right. And it's unfortunate because that's costly. That's a huge mistake to make. And then sometimes they just can't afford to go back and fix it.
And that's what adds to the failure rate. So what are the key ingredients an inventor needs to be prepared with in there, baked in? So the packaging, the UPC, you mentioned some of those. If you can, just run through some of the key ingredients that is in the most common mistakes you see inventors make so that they can be better prepared when they come to someone like you to rep them, or if they were going direct to a buyer.
Yeah, I think the manufacturing piece is important. A lot of inventors do get CAD drawings. So for those that don't know, CAD are these computer-aided design, these mechanical drawings. They're like blueprints for a house. So you got to have those generally for many consumer products in order for a factory to mass produce the product. So a lot of people come to me and they have rough prototypes, or they made them themselves, or they just went on. Well, that I could be here all night with that. I mean, there's a lot of people that come to me, just rough things. I can't even think of any specific names at the moment, but a lot of people just come to me in various stages of disarray, if you will. And they've reached out to factories and they don't have a connection to the factory. They went online, they just found a place. And that's the number one biggest problem, is that they don't know if they're getting reliable manufacturing, if the price is really right. Those things are critical. And can they even make the amount of pieces that the retailer would need? My biggest fear, at least when I go to a big retailer, is, well, let's say you approach me with a product, right? Mm-hmm. If you can't produce 10,000 pieces a month or 50,000 pieces a month, ultimately, or 100,000 pieces a month, that's a huge problem for me, because the retailer has slotted a space for you, right, on their shelf. They've given you this precious little space. And if you can't keep that product in stock, that's very upsetting to a retailer. And they won't be so forgiving if you can't fulfill, right? If you can't get that product there.
Have you had a client that happened with?
Many, many times, where they just ran out of money, right? They weren't prepared financially to go that route. And I always say to inventors, listen, are you financially prepared to do this? Because if we sell to Target or Walmart and your product, after they test it at a few stores, takes off, you've got to be ready to really ramp it up. So that the one big mistake, I guess, to start that off, is that they don't have the manufacturing really secured with somebody that they can trust, or that they know they can trust, and that they don't have the dollars to manufacture. So that's a huge stepping stone that has to be kind of situated well.
Sure. And we can talk more about money in a moment. Do you have an example? Can you tell me a story about a time where you had a big win, something that you're especially proud of, where all those things did line up?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. In recent times, though, there's a couple of examples. I'm working with a pool float or interlocking pool float company called Floaties. Cool. And they make a product called H2Os, like OHS, like, H2O.
That's
and
cool.
These guys came along. The guy's name is Tommy Green, and I've been working with him for years, believe it or not. He approached me, just, hey, Jim, I got this idea. And he'll acknowledge, because I've had him on my podcast and everything, he was not ready when he met me. And I said, he wanted to hire me. And I'm like, Tommy, you're not ready for me. You're not ready to go to retail. Go back, get your crap together, get organized.
Did you tell him what that crap was?
Yeah. Like he had a really well-made product, almost over-engineered, very technical, very costly. I said, Tommy, it's really a glorified pool float. But what his product, where it's different, everyone knows what these pool noodles are, right? I mean,
sure.
you buy them for a couple of bucks at wherever. His product, they have notches and cutouts and holes, so you could build, like you could connect them, like
cool.
Lincoln logs or whatever, right? And you could make basketball hoops and rafts and floats. Nobody has anything like it at all. And he spent a lot of money on the patents, the trademarks, the whole intellectual property thing. But he wasn't ready with his collateral materials, with his presentation decks. His pricing wasn't right. The packaging, he didn't have a display to have them in the stores. So I told him all these things. I'm like, Tommy, you go back, you get this stuff together, and you reach back out to me whenever. Like a year later, I thought he was gone. He calls me up. He's like, I'm ready. And after he took all this advice, and he got almost everything right. We still had to tweak a few things, and it was an ongoing thing. But when we started approaching the big chains like Dick's and Academy and Ace Hardware and Home Depot and all these places, people started saying yes to his product, because he finally took the time and really refined the business part. We were talking about this before, right? Having the proper margins. Oh, I didn't know that the retailers wanted to double the cost of a product. Yeah, so if they buy it for 10, they want to sell it for 20. They don't buy it for 15 and sell it for 17, right? Mm-hmm. They need more money than that type of thing.
Sure.
So he made really beautiful displays, and then he made really beautiful like brochure, like the sell sheets and the decks, and he got the pricing right. And now he's doing really, really well. And he's a perfect example of somebody that didn't have it all together, took the time to get it together, learned, and now he's got a successful business.
Wow.
Yeah.
So someone for all of our viewers or listeners, because they can call this in also today, is what advice do you have for them in terms of going and learning what those steps are, the things that you told him to go do? How did they learn what they need to do to be prepared to come to someone like you or go to a retailer?
Yeah, and again, today it's so easy for people to get information. I think before I answer this, the only issue I have is that there's almost so much or too much information out there that people have to find trustworthy people to take advice from. Now, of course, I'm going to say I'm one of those people, right? But I've been doing this forever. So, for example, if you go to my website, I have a free, like no strings attached, download where you can get the essential steps to inventing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It literally outlines all the basic things you have to do in order.
Wow. So that's jimdebetta.com?
Yeah, and that kind of stuff is available. It's available widely. I mean, there are books.
I know, but you're my guest tonight, and you're the one that I want to hear it from. So people can learn from you by going to your website. There's a list that they can download. And would they come to you during that process as well if they have questions about margin, for example? What should my cost of goods on this be, or what should the suggested retail price be in the process, or wait until they figure it out and then come to you?
Well, I mean, look, I love to get with an inventor when they're just starting out, right? That's the best because, yeah, because a lot of people come to me after the fact, after they've blown their life savings, and if they made all the mistakes because they felt they could do it on their own, right? And they probably shouldn't have, and now they're broke, and now they're looking for help. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's just financially too late. They can't go back and afford to do what they've done. Yeah. But what they should do, right, is if they can get a hold of these steps, like you said, if they go to my website and they get the steps, they're gonna need help with those things. So preferably they'd come back to me and they'd ask me some questions, right? Like, can you clarify what this means? Or who do I work with? If I need a package done, who do I call? If I need a patent attorney, who's the best? If they just do those things and ask those questions, look, I'm not a patent attorney. I'm not a factory. I don't do CAD design. I understand all that stuff, but I don't get my hands dirty with that. But if I can direct them to the right people, then they're off and running, right? They're going to work with people who they can trust, that are reputable, and those people will continue to push them along the path. And then ultimately, hopefully, they come back to me when they're getting more prepared to go to retail, and then I can have their nice, finely finished, finely tuned product that looks all good, that's priced right, that's got a great name, all that stuff. And then I can approach the retailers with a lot of confidence and saying, look at this, look how great this is. And it's impressive.
Sure. Has the world of retail changed its attitude with regard to having single SKU vendors? In other words, can a person with one product get into a store?
Yes, and I can tell you why. Personally, because I work with mostly one item vendors, one product. It used to be very difficult because, and the reason why it's still kind of challenging is because for a retailer to set up a one-person vendor, like you have one item, it's a lot of paperwork. These retailers, they don't want to spend the time back and forth over just one little thing often. But more and more today, especially because all these retailers have websites, they could put singular items up on those websites and you can make millions collectively on these websites. But I can tell you, Lisa, if you have a great product and it's just one thing, the retailers will buy it. Granted, they'd love to have a line of things. It takes up more space. It provides more potential revenue for them. But if you've got something hot, something trendy, believe me, and it's one thing, they'll buy it. If they can make money at it because it's a business, they'll do it. But it is much easier today, and they're more open to doing that today because the world moves quickly. Products trend in and out very quickly. So it's common to have a product in 1 year and it's gone the next.
Sure. Do they tend to roll them out nationally, or will they pick regions and start smaller?
That's another thing. It used to be back in the day, it was an all-in game, I felt anyway. I mean, when I had my own company, it seemed like every time we did business with a retailer, it was, all right, we're going to fulfill for every store. We're going to, the internet wasn't a big thing, so they really went all in to expose the product everywhere. Mm-hmm. Today, retailers will not only test things online first, and then if it tests well, they go to the retail store side. And by the way, a little tip for people, there's typically two different buyers for your product at a retailer. The one that buys for their website and then one that buys for the physical stores. They're often two different buyers.
Good to know.
So they'll test that online sometimes, but there's a lot more testing or limited amount of stores. So a big retailer will say, we'll try this in 50 stores or 100 stores. They also want to make sure that as a vendor, you can handle it, right?
Sure.
And then if it does really well, they're going to come back and start rolling it out more and more. And eventually it can be in all stores. But there are some retailers who will go all in. Again, especially if it's a product that is in a category or sort of similar to something they sold before, but you've got the new and improved version, and they have a history of sales on it, they may just go all in and take a chance on it.
So when you say a history of sales, you mean on another product. If the inventor you're working with has never sold into stores,
right?
Is that it? Maybe they have, yeah. So if it's brand new, or maybe they're even coming to you and you're pitching just off of a prototype. They haven't even gone into production on it, so it's really early. Buyers are still interested without any actual case studies?
Well, again, if I'm pitching a hair accessory, I'm sure you know a little bit about hair accessories, right? A little bit. So if you're pitching a hair accessory, right? Mm-hmm. And look, hair accessories, I don't want to say are hair accessories, but there's only so many things you can put in your hair to hold your hair up, tie it back. But those retailers have probably sold hair accessories forever, right? Sure. So if you come up with something that's a little bit better, a little bit easier to use, it looks different, whatever, they could still look back and say, hey, for the last 20 items we've sold, we've done, I'm making up a number, $10 million a quarter selling these types of products. So, but look, this thing it's a recognizable product. People know what hair accessories are. Most people have hair. And so, hey, we think that this is at a minimum is going to do $6 to $8 million. They can probably go all in on it because there's a history for that type of product. But if you create something that's completely new and novel, like the world has never seen it, that's when they're actually more afraid to do something because there is no history for the product. They're really taking a chance that this really cool new thing is going to work or not. You know, they don't know. So that's actually riskier.
More risky, yeah. And the $1 million question is $1 million. How much money should someone be prepared to have, and where can they find it if they want to go this route?
I get that question all the time. It's so hard to answer.
I hear them asking it. I can hear them out there asking it right now. I'm asking for them.
I'm not even kidding. I had somebody I spoke to yesterday who literally asked me that, and this happens all the time. But just yesterday, says, Jim, what do you think it's going to cost me to go through this process? What do you think it's going to cost me to develop the product, get it manufactured, create molds to make it, package it, to do all the things? I always tell people if it's a very simple product, it doesn't have any wires or electricity, it doesn't have batteries, it doesn't have moving parts. If it's
like a hair accessory,
or like a coffee cup or whatever, anything. You got to figure you're going to spend on the design, to develop it, to get the CAD drawings done, get prototypes done. You could be in that $5,000 to $15,000 range easily, right? Just depends on the complexity of it and the nuances of it, whatever. You're going to probably spend 20 to 30 grand to get your product developed. Depending on whether you file patents and trademarks or not, that that could add or make that number very different, but you're going to spend, and then to manufacture a few thousand pieces of it, now you're up, $25,000, $35,000. It depends. I've seen people do it for less, but I've seen people spend a lot more. But you're going to spend some money to get ready for retail selling.
And is there a way, because they have to have at least a prototype by the time they go to a buyer and the deck and all of that. So all of that has to be figured out. So with that, assuming someone has gotten there, are there any clever or creative, beyond the obvious of trying to go to a bank or sell your house or whatever, ways for people to raise money to do something like this?
Yeah. Hello, Kickstarter. I mean, that's where people are getting their money today. I mean, it's almost like a godsend for inventors, because before that, yes, you either had to find friends and family, a la angel investors, people that would sort of be like angels, right? They would give you this money and allow you to get started. Banks, especially in the last handful of years, are not very friendly to non-revenue, non-proven businesses. I mean, I know I wouldn't lend money straight up to somebody with especially if you don't do that for a living. People don't usually invent for a living. They're usually other things. They have careers and jobs, and now they want to try this business at the hands of the bank. The bank's not usually very, willing to do that. But by setting up a crowdfunding campaign on places like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, I am telling you that there are millions of people ultimately over time that have and will get funded for all the expenses.
Have you ever had anybody that came to you that raised their money that way? Because
yeah, I've had a few.
I've heard some horror stories.
Yeah, and there are horror stories because, again, but I can tell you at least the success rate for raising money is better than the invention success rate.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the lottery is better than, you know, I go hit roulette and probably have better odds too. So,
I think the like Kickstarter, I don't want to misquote, but I think it's in that 20-30% or more definitely get funded fully.
That's awesome.
And I think it's increasing because people are learning how to set up better campaigns. And it's not, I don't think they're hard to do. You just have to know what to do, and you have to know how to market them very well. That's the key. It's not build it and they will come. Marketing, crowdfunding campaigns is everything. That's how you get the word out and you get funded.
Which can turn around and cost you another 10 or 15,000 to hire them.
Right.
If you don't know how to do that.
It's almost like counterintuitive. It's like, yeah, I don't have any money, so I'm raising money, but I need money to market to raise the money.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Chicken and the egg.
But it works, and that really helps people. I mean, obviously people use their credit cards, they use their savings. I don't suggest people use their life savings on this because there's a better chance than not.
Yeah. You don't want to lose everything and start all over again.
It's risky, and it's nice to come out on the good side of things, but especially if you're older and you're nearing retirement and you take a chance and you lose everything, that's devastating to people. So I definitely think to go and do crowdfunding campaigns, to seriously consider that is really the most efficient way, I think, today to do that, because there's really, other than that, it's the old traditional ways of getting money.
So put you in the hot seat for a second. If I came to you when I was working on TC Pets, the one I was on Shark Tank with, and at the time I was doing trade shows, I started at Toy Fair and Magic just to kind of get a feel for what kind of response there would be with just the prototypes, and had quite a few buyers stop by, learned a lot. But ultimately the buyers weren't interested in, and they weren't not interested. They just said it wasn't ready for them and wanted to see sales first. They thought it was clever and had potential, but not really willing to take risks. So I had a lot of boutique and small store sales. I was in around 400 stores by the end of year 2, which sounds incredible, but they were all little tiny boutique stores and I wasn't getting reorders. That said, if I came to you with it, do you think working with someone who understands that space could have made the difference in helping educate the buyer or setting me up for success better?
It definitely is, because that's what I do for people. I mean, that's what I do all the time. And I always tell the inventor, look, don't feel bad. You're not supposed to know how to do this. And I know that the retail buyers, many of them that I've known for 10 years, 15 years or longer, they simply just don't always trust an inventor when they call, because first of all, they say I'm an inventor, and that speaks of inexperience, potentially lack of business acumen. It doesn't always mean that, of course, we know that.
Sure.
But what generally happens is they don't say the right things to the buyer. They tell them their story. They tell them this is the next $1 billion thing. They say all those things that the buyer doesn't need to hear. But I know what the buyer wants to hear and needs to hear, and I give them the confidence that my client or this particular product company has a great product. I'm representing it. They know that I know how to handle everything and anything that goes along with getting onboarded, getting set up as a vendor, making sure the product gets shipped on time, all those nice things that you have to EDI, all those important components. There's no question that I have a much better shot at getting your product sold and successful than you do if you don't do this for a living.
Right.
Period. That's
all right. So you heard it here. I had invented, patented, licensed 7 products, enormous success, all these TV shows, great ego, whew. And made the very mistake that I had been teaching inventors for years not to do, which was going outside of my domain and not knowing how to make and sell products into retail. I was dim-weighted, cost me tens of thousands of dollars because my packaging kept bulging on the water. And so I would get dimensional weight charged randomly and get an extra $2,000 FedEx bill or whatever. I wasn't getting reorders because I hadn't considered how to educate the customer in the store. It really needed to be pitched. There were so many things that I knew how to license. I proved that.
You know what? You got greedy. Let's be honest. You got greedy. You should have you should have stayed home, collected your royalty checks, and just that's it.
I would normally agree with you. I'm not saying that I wasn't greedy, but here's the true backstory.
You just had to go. I just had my world.
I wanted to take over the world. Yeah.
And you didn't call me, so that's your own fault. That's your fault.
That's why I gave you permission to say I screwed up. Yes, I should have just gone to you. I will be the first to admit it. And if I could invent a time machine. And it's funny, I was already struggling. So it was around when the economy changed, and I had 2 office buildings, the big home, the cars, the horses in my front yard that cost $700 a month to feed, kids in private school. The economy started to change, and all my royalties went away. And since they can be cancelable, which many people may not know, when sales drop, I got them back, but that didn't do me any good because the economy was bad. And this inventor had come to me with her product. I tried to license it for her and heard from the manufacturers that it was too big. And in terms of being a $20 item, the dollars per square inch, because they treat it like real estate for our audience, right? So they're looking at a return on that investment. And if it takes up that much space and they only get $20 for it, that's not a good ROI. So I took it, repurposed it as a toy, and I did still talk to some DRTV companies about licensing and got turned down by everybody. And that was when I decided to manufacture and sell. The bigger mistake that I made was thinking that I knew how to do it because I knew how to do this. And I had been in this community for so long that I could figure it out. Whatever I didn't know didn't scare me. I could figure it out. And it should have scared the hell out of me, frankly. I should not have tried to do that on my own. And you're absolutely right. I don't know why I didn't think to call you.
Well, like you said, you had the confidence because you knew product. You understood the process generally. But like you said, each side, licensing or going to retail on your own, they have their particulars, right? It's just like licensing. I understand licensing very well. I've done licensing deals. But still, there's a lot of there's differences. And those little differences are critical in succeeding or making mistakes, like you said, and those mistakes are usually costly financially, and you don't want to make those mistakes. They're avoidable, but people go ahead and they make them anyway.
Right. Well, it's an entirely different business model. Entirely licensing and manufacturing and wholesaling or direct to consumer retailing. Either way, it's an entirely different business model. So the reason I am confessing that for our audience is so that you all understand, as smart as I was not smart enough to pull that off. And in hindsight, and in fact, I mentioned to you before we started tonight, I have a client that has a product with some inventory that I'm going to introduce you to. And I think that's a good route for him as well. So, all right, last question. When do you think someone should license versus wholesaling, retailing, becoming a manufacturer?
Yeah, that's another question I get all the time. I think if you are the type that just doesn't have the time, let's say you have a career and you're happy with that career, or you're retired, or you just don't want to run a business, licensing is an obvious choice, because when you go to market yourself, you're running a business, and it's going to be all day long, especially in the beginning, weekends, and you're going to be learning and doing a lot, and it's crazy. The other reason somebody would license versus going alone is the money. There's an investment, like we were talking about before. You're going to spend thousands to develop, manufacture, sell, and market products, whether you do it on your own website, or locally, boutiques, or you go to big retail. You're going to spend money often and a lot over the course of time. Hopefully you make money, but still, you've got to have that outlay. With licensing, you don't have that outlay. With a great sell sheet, some knowledge on how to approach potential licensees, sometimes a great prototype. If you do it right and understand how to do that right, and you get a licensing deal and you can collect on the royalties, there's really no financial risk for you there. But if you are the type that wants to run your own business and wants to potentially make more money, and I believe firmly that there's a lot more money to be made going it on your own than licensing, generally speaking. Of course, it depends on the products and the industry and all that. But that's why I do this business. And I made my money going it on my own, and had done licensing deals, but still felt like I want control of the business. I want control of my product. I want to hand this business off to my family, my kids, or I want to involve them. And I have a job, but I don't like my job. And I love this business, and I want to have my own product business. then you should do it. But again, there's no excuse for not learning either side. There's great resources on both ends to learn. So those are the general reasons, but
they both have their pros and cons. Licensing is a little less risky, if I'm hearing you right.
Yeah, from a financial standpoint, anyway.
Financially,
but you also tie up your product with the person you license it to, and that, if you don't understand how those contracts and how to get out of that if it's not working, look, there's pros and cons to both. You just have to understand what your personal situation is financially, from a family, work standpoint, what you want to do and don't want to do, and then the choice ultimately becomes clear.
Good answer. I agree. I concur. Stick around for just a moment. Jim DeBetta and your company is WeKnowInventing, correct?
Yes.
But it's jimdebetta.com. So if you'd like more information on how you can work with Jim, or if you'd like to download the information he mentioned earlier, the free checklist, and I'm sure there's a ton of other information, as well as follow Jim. What's the name of your podcast if someone wants to check that out also?
It's Get Retail Ready. It's on all the platforms, Google Play, iTunes, all that. Or they could just go on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that, and they could just see it. I'm always putting up the episodes on there, and it's fun. We got to get you on there because it's good. We need more industry pros on the show. A lot of times we have inventors on, or we just talk amongst ourselves, but we got to get you on there.
Thank you. I would love to. And fancy pants, because you're on all the platforms. This is my only one right now, but that's okay. I want to make sure I understand how to do it, unlike TC Pets, before I go all in on this stuff. Thank you so much for being on the program. I really appreciate it. Again, if you'd like to follow up with Jim, you can go to his website at jimdebetta.com. If you'd like more information about my company and what I do, you can go to lloydmarketinggroup.com. There are some free videos on there. If you want to hear more about the backstory about Shark Tank and what happened with TC Pets, since I mentioned it a little bit tonight, feel free to go to lloydmarketinggroup.com. You watch it right on the homepage. If you go into some of the other videos, there's a lot of tutorials there as well. And I'll be continuing to add more to that. I hope you'll sign up also for our subscribe to our newsletter so that I can update you on these programs as I do them every week, except for holidays. That said, thank you all so much for joining, and thank you, Jim, very much for being my guest. I love you. Mwah. I love you guys. Have an awesome evening. Good night, Jim.
Good night.